Hi, my name is Octavia Barrett, and today we are going to learn how to create an emergency change request using Cherwell Change Management. To begin a new change, you want to click on New Change Request, and then the requester should automatically fill with your name. If it doesn't, then go ahead and select your name. On the change type, it will be emergency. And as you notice, the expedited will automatically be checked and grayed out since it's not being performed on maintenance weekend. Then you will need a title. Anything that is in a red border is a required field, so you will need to fill that out. So we'll go ahead and put in our title and our description. And we'll go through the rest of our fields. Protected data impact. This is a yes or no question, and does this change impact any of our protected data like income tax or HIPAA? For this one, we're going to say no. We have hosted by and managed by. Right now, we're going to say that City of Columbus, but eventually we'll have some different vendors listed in here. Documentation update available or applicable. Does that mean, that means that after this change, do we need to update any of our documentation? For this particular change, we will say no. Priority. As you can see, we have our impact and urgency grid that we use for incidents. So we're going to use the same thing here. We'll say multiple users. Risk, low, medium, or high. Outage. Is there going to be an outage with an emergency? Most likely there's already an outage, so we're going to go ahead and say yes. And then at the top here, you'll notice that we have incident must be linked. Since it's an emergency change, we need to have an incident linked to this to show why it is an emergency change. And we also need to have at least one task required. So now we'll go ahead and move down to our tabs. Down at the bottom here, we have departments. To link a department, you just click on the link button. And you can pick one of these, or you can hold your shift key down and select several at a time, or you can hold your control key down and select individual departments. Once you select your departments, go ahead and click on OK. Then we'll move it over to our incident tab. And again, we have our link button. We'll click on that, and we want to make sure that we select an incident, not a request. So we'll want to look at our record type. And then we'll select our incident. Now we're going to move over to our emergency details. What is the business impact of not making this change? Why are we doing this change as an emergency as opposed to scheduling it later? We will say the system is down. Other change details. Technical change details. This is what we need to do, the technical details to accomplish our change. And the impact and risk of our change. Now we'll move on to our execution details. Our implementation plan. What are we going to do to implement this change? Testing details. What are we going to do after we reboot the server to test to make sure everything's working? And are there any backup plans? If this doesn't work or there are adverse reactions, do we need to back out this plan? And if so, what will we do? Now the outage tab. Here we're going to say our outage, we'll say that it started today at 1 o'clock. That's when we noticed that it went down. We can leave the outage end date open for now until we reboot and finish this change. It will be required before we close out the change. What system was impacted by this? We're going to put that here. Then we have our journals tab. This is going to be any notes or comments that have been added to our change request. Right now we don't have any, but if you want to create one, you can always click on New Journal Note, or in the record actions, you can click on Add Note. Moving on to tasks. To create a task, you want to click on New Task. And like we said before, at the top of our screen here, we did have those warnings. They are now gone because we have an incident linked, and now we're creating our task. To create a task, you want to make sure you select a team and put instructions in there. And then you will also need to put a start date and time and end date and time. So our start time is going to be at 2 o'clock. And our end time should only take us 15 minutes, so we'll make that 2:15. So now we are ready for our ECAP approval. So we can go ahead and click on Ready for Approval. If we decided that this was an immediate emergency that we had to implement right away without getting ECAP, then we would click on Ready for CAB Review. That is only after we have done the work. So we'll go ahead and click on Ready for Approval. And it's telling us required data capture has not been met. So let's look at all of our tabs to make sure we have everything filled out. And we don't, so we need to fill out our start date and our end date. So we'll go ahead and say 1:45. And this is different from our task and our outage time. This is our change request start and end time. So we're going to say that we started this at 1:45 and we're going to end it by 2:30. Now we can click on Ready for Approval. So now our change is pending ECAP approval. An email will be sent out to the ECAP for them to review and approve. And once that's done, they will go in and you can see now here we have waiting ECAP approval. Once they approve it, this will be approved. And now the change is in scheduled status, so now we can go ahead and perform our task. Once we perform our task, we'll want to go in here and close out our task. Mark that as complete. That error message was saying that we need to make an assignee, so I need to go in here and assign this to myself. Now that our task is completed, we can go ahead and say that it's executed. Now we need our required closure notes and comments, so we need to go into our outage and say our outage time is actually 2:30, and then put in our comments. Before we put in our comments, we need to say whether or not there's no issues. If there's no issues after we have completed it, we can click on Add Closure Note and then put in our comments. And when you put in your comments here, you want to make sure that you put in a good closure comment so everybody understands what was completed and that everything is actually working. Completed successfully may not necessarily show that everything came back up correctly, so we want to make sure we put those comments in there. And say OK. Now we can move on to fully implemented. And now we're pending CAB review and for PIR status. And we'll review that during our CAB meeting. And there you have completed an emergency